polemics to pulps and everything in between. Unapologetically Lutheran. Always biblical. Always entertaining. Always in that order. And now, here is your host, Reverend Brandon Warr.
All right, so this man here needs no introduction, even though I'm going to try to do one. Sharp cultural critiques, pulp aesthetics, fearless commentary. He is the Rageaholic. He is RazörFist. How are you doing, sir?
I'm fantastic. I'm glad to be here. I've consumed a number of your videos. You did one on, I want to say, the canon of Scripture, the persistent fallacy of Martin Luther just wantonly, like a mongoose on crack, ripping Bibles, ripping books out of the Bible and all of that.
Oh yeah,
just such a persistent falsehood. And what I think I watched your video on that. I watched a couple of your videos in response.
Oh, thank you.
So yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
It's always great to have those resources. Like Javier Perdomo does some good stuff. I think you do some good stuff. I love that stuff. And of course, Jordan Cooper and Brian Wolfmueller and whoever.
Exactly. And that was one of those, I say, usually I hate watching my own videos, but the Luther one and the Book of James was like the one I say, okay, I can, if the Lord took me, I would be okay. Cause that is one of the most irritating myths out there, that he just hated the Book of James and he wanted to take it out. And, and what's interesting is that he quotes it in the Small Catechism, which is one of our confessional documents. So yeah, which one is it? Did he hate it and want to rip it out of the Bible, or did he, include it in one of the fundamental doctrines of the Lutheran faith?
Yeah, I love the part where you were talking about the context, the greater context, where there had been prior remarks in the epistles, I believe, where it was talking about, there are epistles of different elements and of stone and straw and this is a reference to the epistle of straw comment was an outgrowth of this, which I thought it was great. I mean, you knew there was a problem with the story when you can literally buy a facsimile of the Martin Luther Bible and it has the Book of James in it. He's a really curious critic of the Book of James. He went ahead and included it in his official canon. Also hates that Apocrypha so much.
The Apocrypha. Oh, I just happen to have a ASV from the Augustana Lutheran Synod that happens to have the Apocrypha in it. I guess they didn't get the memo.
I guess I have the Lutheran Apocrypha, the hardcover that they published a few years ago, with full commentary from Martin Luther and Johann Gerhard. So I guess, they're a really strange anti-fan club of the Apocrypha, these guys.
Yeah, well, that crazy Johann Gerhard, when he's in volume 27, I believe, when he's talking about why, like, the call of Martin Luther and what he was doing with the Reformation. Gerhard quotes from Wisdom of Solomon in order to prove that, Luther had the authority to reform the church. And it's like, then you hear, papists or the East online, like, oh, Lutherans hate the Apocrypha. It's like, well, we kind of use it. We kind of use it in our hymns. We kind of use it in our intro. We kind of use it to prove that Martin Luther actually had authority to do this stuff. So I don't know.
Yeah. Not only that, but Martin Luther had some pretty effusive praise for some of those books. Wisdom of Solomon, I know he was a big fan of. Ecclesiasticus, he was a big fan of. Because it's like, Ecclesiasticus is like more Proverbs, which is great. Yeah. I absolutely love that book. There's great stuff in there. I also love Daniel versus the Dragon, which is amazing.
Yes.
I absolutely love that. Just like high flight mythic Bible stories. Or my favorite book of the Bible is the Book of Daniel, because of that mythic heroic kind of quality that it has to it. Written in that kind of sweeping style. I've always loved that. So you get some of that in the Apocrypha, which I dig.
Exactly. And well, I guess we could transition to how you became Lutheran, obviously alphabet soup stuff. What kind of Lutheran are you with that? Because I was going to say, with the historic lectionary, Bell and the Dragon and, Wisdom of Solomon, Ecclesiasticus, those are in the intro. It's the chanted intro. It's like at the beginning of the service and everything. So, getting into that, I guess, how did you get into Lutheranism? Because I've been a fan, and now I've been chomping at the bit to ask you this, because I've been a fan of yours for a while. First off, where do you get your ideas?
I'm gonna throw a shoe at you. It's fantastic.
Well, I mean, we could have opened with how I got you into this interview, which was with a cheese sandwich. So
yes, with a grilled cheese sandwich. my ideas, of course, come from God, because we're all our individual popes. Didn't you know?
oh,
That's
exactly,
how that works.
yeah. Yeah, that's how the sola scriptura thing works, right? Yeah.
Yes, that's how that works. It's solo scriptura, actually, is what it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, I got into Lutheranism because I'm German and it's the law. No, actually, when I was a little kid, I was born dedicated in the church, not baptized. Interestingly enough, I still have not been baptized. As I've come back into my congregation, that's going to happen. But I was born and raised in the Church of God. My father's a pastor, and a curious subset of the Church of God, which is the Church of God Anderson, which is today would be kind of defined as non-denominational Christianity, but in actuality, it's anti-denominational Christianity. It's kind of a radical sort of thing. But anyway, so my father's ordained minister in that and planted a few churches and all of that stuff. But all throughout that, I had some relatives and stuff who I had a grandfather through marriage, strangely enough, who was originally from Kenosha, so Wisconsin Synod guy, and moved out to Arizona, joined the LCMS because Wisconsin Synod isn't really a thing out here.
Right.
And so whenever I would stay over there with him and my grandma, and they had some kids long story, he wound up divorcing my grandmother, but he still was kind of my grandfather. Like, he was still in the picture, right? So he marries into another family, and they had kids who were my age. So I don't know what that makes them. Nothing really, because he's not a blood relative. But anyways, so whenever I would stay over there, hang out with the kids, play video games, whatever, you know the rule. If you were raised Christian, if it's a weekend and it's a Friday, okay, that's fine. On Saturday, whatever. But if you stay the night on Saturday,
oh yeah,
it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be our church, but you better be in a church on Sunday morning, right? So it was perfect whenever I would stay over at my grandfather's, because he was Lutheran, devout Lutheran. So they knew I was going to end up in a church. And a pretty good LCMS congregation out here in like the Metro Phoenix area. Pretty big, had a really good like Sunday school program and stuff, but I'll never forget, like, coming from a lower church Protestant background, like walking in there for the first time, and it's like, okay, this is odd. There's a lot of candles. Like, this is why is the lighting so low? Where isn't the choir supposed to be on the stage? Why are they on like a shelf behind my head? Like, what is all of this? Like, it was very odd, but it was unmistakably Christian. And it was, I remember asking my mom about it, and she's like, "Oh, they're fine. They're just kind of Catholic. It's no big deal." Like, they're
the redheaded stepchild of Christianity. It's those Lutherans over there.
Exactly. And I think my parents even wound up coming a couple of times. Like, it was fine. So when the congregation that was in Church of God that I belonged to and did a lot of missions work with and stuff sort of fell apart. It was one of those seeker-friendly churches in the late 90s, early 2000s that sort of collapsed after 9/11 and the .com bubble bursting, and all that took out a lot of churches. And so I kind of fell away naturally because the congregations sort of split to the four winds. And when I began to feel the conviction to return to my faith, and it was little by little, this baby steps over the years, I kept thinking, like, I needed something more foundational. Look, I like the theology of the Church of God Anderson. Believe it or not, they actually have a pretty rich literature. D.S. Warner, the guy who sort of founded it, wrote extensively, published the Gospel Trumpet. If they wanted to have their own confession of faith, they could have one, but they don't. And because they don't, it's kind of rootless. There's no foundation there. And remembering Lutheranism and remembering my my grandfather and all the times that I had been in there. And, like, you know, I was looking for something a little more foundational, a little more put together. And I kept driving past this gorgeous Art Deco church, just like weekly. I'd be driving past this thing, and and it was hilarious. This is a church that I had known of for years, but I had never walked into it. And one day I drive past and I look over and see the sign as if for the first time ever, and it says it's a Lutheran church.
Oh, wow.
So I'm like, oh. I was unencumbered by all the baggage of the alphabet serial, you know, ELCA.
Gotcha,
I didn't
right.
know that I I didn't know that I could be walking into, you know, a pride parade. I had no idea. But I'm walking into so I basically just blind. I walk in there one day. This is in the heart of COVID. Oh. And this should have been sign number one that this was a great congregation. They were not locked down. And this was
nice.
Like maybe 2 weeks after the lockdown order. So the minute the 14-day lockdown order was lifted, they were worshiping again. And went there, and it was great. I didn't know anything about what their particular subset of Lutheranism was at the time. I learned later, but it was great. And little by little, I just sort of became inculcated and I guess catechized, because they do the full-blown catechesis, you know, Martin Luther class before church every single day, every single Sunday, and on and on. Like, it's a proper Lutheran church. It's just not LCMS.
Okay. Well, yeah. I'm not LCMS either, so that's okay. So
yeah. Well, it's confessional. It's certainly not ELCA. It's a LCMC. So
okay.
And
my Lutheran Church is a mission for Christ.
Yeah. So I'm not big on them allowing women's ordination, but because they have such a loose agglomeration and organizational structure, the conservative congregations and the confessional congregations are not impelled to do so. So they don't. So right. It's like you kind of can.
Yeah, they have more kind of independent structure.
Yes, exactly. So the individual congregation that I'm a part of, you know, really the only thing that separates it from, say, you know, LCMS or AELC is open communion. That's like the only real functional difference. There's even, it's funny, I went to an LCMS service recently and they didn't have chunks of the liturgy that the LCMC church that I go to. I was like, what in the world? They omit it? I had no idea, but I love both services.
Yeah. So, and that's interesting. It's extremely interesting. I'm not LCMS either. We don't need to get into alphabet soup or anything, but I'm in the
but we will, because it's
Lutheran. It's almost like, well, you know a lot about a Lutheran when you ask what color is your hymnal. So you know a lot about So I'm Eldona. So we are Evangelical Lutheran Diocese of North America. So we're more Episcopal polity.
Okay.
Probably LCMC.
Yeah, when you mentioned a bishop, I was like, okay, all right, not LCMS.
Right. So I was LCMS when I first became Lutheran, and then certain things happened. Then I ended up in the Eldona, but Eldona is a much more. People think about LCMS as being the conservative one, the conservative synod. We kind of take them with a little more conservatism especially on the Book of Concord. So, somewhat strict.
Well, look at that controversy a couple of years ago with the large catechism and all the goofy essays and stuff that were included in that. It was really weird. I mean, you have to keep in mind the LCMS, like 10, 15 years ago, had that big kind of, they basically had an existential fight for whether or not they were going to turn left or right. And so they've been drifting rightward the last 10, 15 years, but every so often that sort of spasmodic fit of leftism sort of it sort of bubbles to the surface a little bit. And that's been my observation anyways.
Oh yeah. And it's definitely a thing. And you've got a lot of the, warring factions within the LCMS, and a lot of them are going right for sure, but you still have that Kieschnick era, can't we all just get along leftism going on there too, which is what kind of made its way into the large catechism controversy. And
Yep.
I mean, on the one hand, it gave us like kind of a scope of, okay, who is it that's actually, because they won't come out and say who's actually like leaning left and everything, but the ones that were defending it, you could definitely see where their kind of trajectory was going. It also kind of exposed a lot of crazies in the LCMS. So I mean, I kind of looked at it from, because at the time, like, I wasn't in the LCMS, so I've been in Eldona since like right before COVID hit. So I was looking at it from an outsider's perspective, and it was
Yeah.
kind of like, you could see there was some crazies that were being expelled, and then the somewhat left-wing contingent wanted to brush everybody that had concerns as, you're all just neo-Nazis. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It didn't help when actual neo-Nazis joined the chorus and criticized.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Probably
No.
wasn't helpful. But yes. But yeah, that entire situation was just, it was sort of, it's a wake-up call, because I think sometimes, shoot, I'm from Arizona. This probably happened in our politics. We were Goldwater country for decades. The state of Barry Goldwater. If you were a
Exactly.
Democrat, you could not get elected here. Like, you just couldn't for decades. And then Republicans were so secure in that status as being this sort of conservative bastion in Arizona, they got lazy. And then they turned into kissing cousins with Democrats. And little by little, it got watered down until now Democrats are very competitive in this state. And it's not just the stolen elections. It's also the laziness, the fecklessness of Republicans. I feel like there's a little bit of that going on with the Missouri Synod. A little bit. They're like
Absolutely.
a little lazy, and we're the conservative guys. It's like, yeah, but you actually have to maintain that on some level a little bit. And
exactly.
But again, that said, like I said, I went to an LCMS service recently. It was great. I thought it was a really cool congregation. So, it's still very much what I remember as a kid.
Excellent. So, getting back to the Apocrypha for a second. So you like Bell and the Dragon.
Yeah.
You like that. I like Tobit and things like that. A lot of that kind of, like, how did you put it? The grandioseness of the scriptures and everything.
Yeah, like written, not mythic, because it's not, but written in like a sweeping kind of mythic or epic kind of style. That's the kind of stuff I love. That I love just the style of that. That's why I like the Book of Daniel. I love the Book of Jonah for that reason. That kind of style of writing.
So, and you write a lot of stuff like that. I got my my Long Midnight right here.
Hey.
I was gonna get out my Ghost of the Badlands, but unfortunately my son stole it from me. He's reading it right now. So
Nice. It's behind me. So
so how much of that gets into your writing? Like, how much of the, whether it be theological implications, obviously Ghost of the Badlands is heavily theological. It's basically the conversion of St. Paul. But how much of that is intentional? How much of that is actually something that just kind of finds its way as you're working the story out? How much is that?
Yeah, it was wild. I have never stepped into a story trying to direct it in a theological direction. Like, your morality, if you are writing in a sincere way, and as a Christian, if you have made yourself available to the Spirit that gave you rise, if you are not intruding upon the creative province of God, it's just naturally your morality and your Christian nature is going to find its way into your stories in little sort of imperceptible ways. So probably even in the Night Vale stories, of which there are now 2, and I'm working on 3 and 4, there's still a little bit of that where you have, it gets compared to like the Thief video game series, which is not a compliment that I resent. I love that because I love that series, but it's actually very distinct morally from Thief, because the Thief series is about Garrett, a guy who is just trying to steal and make a living and retire, and he sort of accidentally does good things. Whereas the main character in the Night Vale series, Xerxes, is basically a hero who is sort of initially in denial about his heroism and is slowly coming to realize that his morality is deeper held than he thought, and that it's incompatible with his life of crime and vocation. And the problems that he finds himself in are really outgrowths of that incompatibility. So that kind of, in a way, could kind of be construed as sort of a little bit of a moral undercurrent. Goes to the Badlands. I thought I was just going to write sort of a hellfire and brimstone, old style, pulpy Western. And as I started writing it, it turned into a analogy for Paul's conversion on the road to Damascus. Like, it turned into a straight up treatise. And until I got into the, after it was done and I read through it, I was like, well, how did this happen? Like, how did it like, I don't remember doing that. It really was kind of a God taking over sort of thing. So I went backward and looked through the epistles at some of what Paul had written and tightened some of it up a little bit more, right? And so that led to me including a D.S. Warner quote at the beginning about the loss of right hand and right eye in order to put yourself away from sin, and all that stuff. And so it wound up being very much like epistle rooted analogy for Paul's conversion, ultimately, to the point where I wound up naming a character Paul, and a saloon wound up being named Damascus, probably a little on the nose, but it really became that. So, but it made itself that. Like, I honestly didn't do that really. A lot of that after the fact was just little tightening and tweaking. It was right there. It was right there, and kind of, I don't know, divine afflatus on some level took over.
Yeah.
I assert that because I had to stop myself from finishing writing the script in one night, which doesn't happen. Like, it just, I literally was over halfway through and I was like, okay, I gotta stop because I'm gonna burn myself out. Like, I don't want the latter half to be worse than the first half. So I'll stop now.
Exactly.
And I'll finish it tomorrow. And I have this trick that I learned from Walter Gibson, writer of The Shadow, that whenever you stop writing, stop in the middle of a sentence.
Yes.
Stop in the middle of this, so that then when you pick up writing, you have to think about what you were you have to put yourself in that headspace. Okay, what was I thinking when I wrote this sentence? How does this need to end? And
exactly.
And so the next night I picked off, and it was the exact same thing. Like, my fingertips couldn't keep up with my brain. So but I was really pleased with how it turned out.
Oh, it's excellent. All of your stuff is excellent stuff. And yeah, you've kind of promulgated the Iron Age media,
Yeah.
You came up with this term, right? Like you were the first one I know of that's used the term Iron Age, I believe.
I have heard that there were people who used it before, but in connection with like this current wave of media, no, I'm pretty sure I was the one who coined it. I had heard that maybe Mark Millar had used it years ago. I had heard that someone else claimed they coined it. If they say they did, I believe them. But in connection with what I was talking about, the current wave of independent comic books, literature, video games, even independent movies that is coming out, and that is undeniable. Like, you can see a lot of them have been very successful. I'm pretty sure that was just coined in my video about the Iron Age.
Okay, well, if I ever have Mark Millar on the channel, I'll just, I'll say he did it. But you're here,
right?
So you came up with the Iron Age.
Yes.
No, but what you were saying is extremely important, I think, for Christians who are getting into, putting things out. Whether it be I put out Pulp Fiction stories myself and everything else. The last thing we want to do, I believe, as Christians is to sit down and say, okay, I'm going to try to convert people now, because ultimately that's the Holy Ghost job. It's not ours. But if our faith is inculcated into us and our worldview is inculcated, heck, even our influences will come through. I mean, in my Pulp Noir book, I named the city Chandler City because, well, that's kind of on the nose. I happen to like Raymond Chandler.
Right.
One of the officers is Louis Carroll. I wonder where that comes from.
Right.
It's the same thing with the faith. I think the faith, you don't have to press the faith on the story. And I take a very Tolkien-esque kind of view of that. And it sounds like you do too, where you're not going in there trying to push the message like some people on the opposite end of the political spectrum would do, but you're going in there with this kind of worldview and this foundation that ultimately undergirds what you're doing.
Right, exactly. And the second volume, which the script for that's been done for a while, we've just been, dealing with like getting artists and having artists flake out and stuff like that. So that's what's taking so long on that one. But the second one is the same way. It wound up just having, I just think there's an element too of the Bible that is transcendent regardless. So if you're raised in the faith, as I was, as you're writing and a transcendent theme or a relatable theme begins to present itself, which should happen naturally if you're doing your job properly anyways, you're certainly not going to be disinclined from drawing the obvious parallel to a Bible story that would be familiar to a large amount of your readership. Everybody knows the story of Noah's Ark, even if they're not Christian. Everyone knows the story of Adam and Eve, even if they're not Christian. It is, right, these are transcendent stories. These are transcendent. Everybody knows these. They're cultural. Why do you think every cringy early 2000s action movie reboot had a subtitle of like Armageddon?
Right.
Or Revelation, right? These are things that everybody's familiar with on some level, even if they don't have a real biblical understanding of them. So I think that's how it winds up sort of inserting itself without becoming proselytic, really. That's what I was sort of trying to avoid. But people will still accuse you of it anyways if there's any kind of Christian undercurrent. That's just how that goes.
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, I think my Pulp Fiction's a little bit more explicit when it comes to there's like one of the characters, she went to Catholic school when she was younger. She's a runaway. She's quoting scripture, but it's like you don't it meant something for that character because she's getting into street fights, but yet she's quoting scripture, and you kind of deal with that dichotomy of like, okay, here's a street kid who's getting into fights and following around.
There's some of that in Ghost of the Badlands, where you have this zealot, this masked zealot, running around quoting scripture and then blowing a guy's brains out. And it's like, it makes you think, it definitely has as a sort of touchstone Solomon Kane from Robert E. Howard, where you have this man of violence, but heroism, unmistakably white hat. There's no question what the Ghost of the Badlands is trying to do is morally upright, but there's a zealousness and an unbending violence to it that is clearly at loggerheads with an actual biblical understanding of Christianity. And so what that does, I think, especially with a character whose origin you do not explicitly state, is it makes people wonder. It gets the wheels turning in their head. How did he get that way? What happened to this guy? Like, what in the world? How do you get to the point where you are literally quoting from the book of James and then ventilating some dude's brainstem? Like, how does this happen? And then and any odd thing you can throw in there, from the way that he dresses to the style of firearm to whatever, all of that just gets people thinking. Another thing about Ghost of the Badlands was it was like an experiment in almost narrative chiaroscuro, where it was like, how little can I tell the reader and have them finish the thought for me? Like how
exactly.
I didn't over explain things. Some of the plot, if you just take it at face value, it might seem to have a plot hole, but I was deliberately doing that to see, okay, does the reader just finish the thought? How little can I say? How little dialogue can there be? How little exposition can there be? And have the plot still make sense? And apparently it still makes sense. So maybe I'll just have like 3 words in the next one. I don't know.
Hey, there you go. Well, Robert E. Howard is really good at
Christ
that
is
too.
king. That'll be it. No, I'm just
There you go. Well, if you say Christ is king, apparently that's anti-Semitic. So, and you're already Lutheran,
Right.
so
Right, that's true.
I was told that Bellarmine, the top Roman Catholic apologist in the
Yeah.
Reformation, read On the Jews and Their Lies right before he died, and then he spoke with Mossad, and you see what happened there. But
I heard about that. Gosh,
yeah,
dang it. I knew
yeah,
it.
he was this close to becoming Lutheran. No, um,
Thought it was odd
yeah,
that last Bellarmine thesis about burning down their synagogues. That was a weird one. That
yeah,
was a weird one.
that was weird. Um, yeah, but you mentioned Solomon Kane. I don't know. I kind of ripped off Solomon Kane with my Ezekiel Creed book. So I
Right.
love Solomon Kane. And when I've been watching your videos for years. So when you put out the Solomon Kane videos, it was like I was ecstatic. Like my wife was
Yeah.
like, "Why are you so excited about a YouTube video?" I was like, "It's Solomon Kane." Like
Yeah.
that is the coolest, probably the
Yeah.
best Robert
And
E. Howard creation.
I think he is the best. And it's funny, Conan is way more popular, but that's really more a function of the fact that Conan was rediscovered first.
Right.
And in like the 50s, 60s, when they started reprinting the paperbacks and whatever. In his lifetime, all indications to me are Solomon Kane was the more popular creation of the two.
Oh yeah.
To the point where when when Conan was introduced in Weird Tales, they literally had an introduction. Actually, later they were like 3 Conan stories deep, and to get people to read Conan, the introduction read, "This writer, this promising young writer, will be familiar to readers as the creator of the dour Puritan Solomon Kane."
Solomon Kane.
So
Yep.
Conan was piggybacking off the popularity of Solomon Kane. That got reversed, really, I think, because of those beautiful Frazetta covers on the yellow paperbacks and all of that. And, it's obvious why that had commercial cachet. And it also helps that the Conan stories are incredible. But yeah, in his lifetime, I have a feeling Solomon Kane was slightly more popular. Actually, truthfully, some of his other pulp stuff, Sailor Steve Costigan and, whatever, some of those characters probably were a little more popular than either of them. But in terms of
Yeah.
making money, anyways.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I have the biggest soft spot for Solomon Kane because I basically ripped him off here, and gave him a gun. So there you go. Gave him more of a Lutheran theology too. I never say that Ezekiel Creed is Lutheran, but if you pay attention, he kind of is. So,
Right.
what's your stance on that? Like, how is, because you did a whole video on the Elric versus the Witcher, and I mean it's clearly plagiarism. And thank you for bringing, I know a lot of people have pointed that out before, but like where's the line, especially for as a Christian, plagiarism versus inspiration versus I'm going to put a prompt into Chat GPT and let the chat bot write it for me. Like we're dealing with so much when it comes to the 8th commandment and being honest and everything. Like, what advice would you give to, I don't know, maybe a young guy that's starting out doing this stuff and just kind of discovering this type of Iron Age media and writings? Like, hey, I may want to do a graphic novel. I may want to write a little pulp novella, whatever. Where does law and gospel fit into that?
Yeah, I would say the line between inspiration and plagiarism is citation. I think you can get alarmingly close to just Xeroxing characters and plots and whatever, and some of the greatest writers and artists and whatever have. They have, like, straight up. As long as you are upfront about the inspiration for doing it. Chandler, when he started writing, was mighty close to what Dashiell Hammett was doing. But Chandler was the first guy to say Dashiell Hammett is a genius. I'm inspired by him and other people. He would also always cite all of his influences. But he was the first guy to say, look, I am taking what Dashiell Hammett has done and I am moving it further. That's all I'm doing here. To me, as long as you're citing, it's okay. That's my issue with Andrzej Sapkowski, the writer of The Witcher, really, is he copied Elric. He copied kind of the whole way magic works, the way the universe works, the way the multiverse works. I mean, he copied a lot of stuff from Elric and then claimed he was a genius who thought of it all himself. And most peculiarly, he was working for a Polish publisher who just happened to be translating Elric into Polish at the time when he
That
came
really
up with the idea.
that really is
of
the
Witcher.
smoking gun there.
It's like, come on, dude, come on. So and so consequently, but here's the thing: Elric had all these video games in development for years, and they never got one. Witcher got the video game out first. That's it. That's really what made
What
Witcher
solidified
more
it.
popular in the modern. Yeah, in the modern day, because I mean, Elric had his heyday. Don't get me wrong. In the like 70s, 80s, whatever, there were a bunch of rock bands who made concept albums about him. They were working on animated movies. They've always been working on movies. Apparently, they have greenlit now a TV series and a video game. There's a TV series and a video game in development, and they are in development. They have gotten over the hump. And it's funny, the last guy who pitched a series to Amazon, I believe, turned it down on the basis that it was too similar to The Witcher. That's where we're at. It's hilarious. So,
Well, I mean, they could just they could update it for the current year and do Elric of Power or something. Put Galadriel in, it'd be a big crossover multiverse thing.
yeah,
and they'll completely
camera
screw it up.
negative. Yes, camera negative Elric. He'll be black as an oil slick. The Netflix version of it. Yes. Blacker than Harlem.
Nice. I would pretty much agree with everything you said there. In my mind, I would go back to Tolkien's idea of being sub-creators. I mean, at the end of the day, we're not really creating anything from scratch. We're borrowing things from what God has already created. We're borrowing some of our worldview. We're borrowing a lot of things from around us. No man is an island. So it would be foolish, I think, of anybody to not cite I'll be honest with you, if it was a choice between my Ezekiel Creed, Solomon Kane ripoff and someone reading Solomon Kane, I'd say, go read Robert E. Howard's stuff. I mean, are you kidding me? Like that's what I want. I want more people to see, like, this is actually a good way to tell stories, and Pulp is a good way to tell stories, because there's
the tough part is when other people have mixed elements that you're inspired by previously. That's one of the things, the thief comparisons to Night Vale. It's because I always wanted to tell a medieval fantasy story about a thief, because I'm a big Robin Hood mark. I love Robin Hood anything. Ever since I saw Prince of Thieves as a kid and played the game.
No, wait a minute. I'm told that he was a socialist and a communist and whatever else of it is. Hollywood tells me that.
I've heard this. He robbed from the rich, and by rich you mean government, and gave to the poor, and by poor you mean taxpayer. Yes, absolutely.
Yes. That's so clearly communist.
Yes, clearly communist, quite clearly. But when you're inspired by Robin Hood and then you mix that with the writing style of Chandler and noir, and you make it a noir, like a street level crime story set in a fantasy world. Like, I was always fascinated with the idea of like watching Return of the King and seeing how detailed the city was and being like, you know what? I don't really care about the War of the Ring. Like, can I just hang out on these streets and like see what happens here? Like, what happens in this town? I wanted like beat cops in Minas Tirith. You know what I mean? Like, I wanted to know what happened. And so I had this really big world that I'd already made. And so I just zoomed way in on one tiny little dot on that map and said, oh, how well would this hold up to scrutiny? And, in terms of the detail and world building that I've already done, I'll just tell a really small story in a really big world. Those are always, to me, contrast is always the best. Big story, small world, small story, big world. Those are always to me, like Blade Runner. Look at Blade Runner. Small story, big world. That's why that movie's so interesting. The one Blade Runner movie that exists, by the way, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes.
So when you mix those things, though, you kind of get something similar to like a Thief, because Thief was inspired by film noir as well, as it turns out. It's inspired by movies like The Third Man and all the stuff that I love covering on the Film Noir Archives.
Oh, speaking of Film Noir Archives, you just did one on the Phantom Lady.
Yeah.
Now, this one is not related at all. There's two Phantom Ladies. There's this Phantom Lady here. Do you remember the DC rights issues that happened around the 70s with this Phantom Lady, with the comic book. There was a guy that he owned one run of the rights, but DC was like, hey, you can't call her the Phantom Lady. And so he was like, okay, well, I'll keep everything else, but I'll change the name. Yeah. And he changes the name. Do you remember? He named her Night Vale.
Seriously?
Yeah, he named her Night Vale.
I had no idea. I had absolutely no idea.
We're doing 7 Degrees of Kevin Bacon at this point. So
we are a little bit. Of course, it's funny. When I named my series Night Vale, I had no idea that there is apparently some podcast called Welcome to Night Vale. I had no idea. 2 words, Night Vale, not 1 word. But I had no idea. I would have named it something else. I actually had 2 working titles that I wanted to go with, and I've regretted not picking the other one ever since. But but yeah,
it's funny. It's funny how things happen like that.
Yeah, I mean, usually names wind up being like the least important thing about anything. Shoot, I didn't even pick the name The Rageaholic for my channel. My editor did. I couldn't figure out what to name it. I was thinking all this heady, oh, we'll think of something clever. It'll be like a phrase or something. It'll be like, right? Like, I don't know, down the rabbit hole or something like that. It'll be something just shockingly clever. And I was overthinking it. And finally, my editor just turned to me and said, dude, you rant. Just call it The Rageaholic. I'm like, okay, fine.
There you go.
I guess we'll just settle with it. And it stuck. I was never that big a fan of it. And I'm still not.
You're still not a fan. Well, it is a good name. I will say it's a good name. My channel name's very similar because years ago, I was like, oh, I'm going to do Warzone Media Arts. My last name's Warr and this and that and the other thing. And then fell off of YouTube for a while, and then my bishop's just like, oh, just use your name. It doesn't matter. Just use your name. No one cares about this. Just use your name. So
yeah, if I had Warr as a surname, I probably wouldn't use any other name.
Yeah,
I guess a little John McCain in me. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, it's one of those names that nobody. Well, you pronounce it right. I've had so many people say where. I've had so many people say Ward with a D on the end. It's like, why are we adding letters to my name? This is ridiculous. It's Warr. It's always been Warr. It will always be Warr.
They also had another comic character that I like from the Golden Age, Blonde Phantom, who was really good.
Oh, yeah.
And later on, she got bought by Marvel and whatever. I don't know whatever happened to her. But DC that's an example of a tear that DC was on for a long time there, where there would be a particular comic that was direct competition to something they were doing. So they sued them into oblivion until they couldn't afford to publish their comic anymore. And once they hit bankruptcy court, they bought the company and bought the character. They did that with Shazam. They did it with so many characters. Like you could tell DC were originally founded by mobsters. Like the way they behave is just.
Oh yeah,
they're the comic book mob.
Exactly. I guess I'll show you this real quick. I got over here. I don't know if I can show this this on camera because apparently it's a racist cover, but got some jungle people out there. Old
nice
Argosy.
Well, hold on just a moment. I have something even better.
Okay.
Some OG. All right. There.
Beautiful.
City of the Shadow.
Beautiful.
The Murder Master. Some beautiful stuff. These are originals. And there are companies, actually, that are doing full reproductions, like full facsimiles of these old pulps now. For different Phantom Detective, I've been on a tear of buying the Phantom Detective stuff. I mean, they reproduce them page for page, including the ads and articles.
Yes.
Like everything. So I'm addicted to those right now.
Yeah. What would say your favorite pulp genre would be? Would it be noir? Would it be proto superhero? Like what is top for you?
Crime. Probably crime generally. I think it works best. Crime/detective. So I love the Chandler stuff. I love the Hammett stuff. W.R. Burnett. There were more than that. Spillane, I'm a big fan of, and Cornell Woolrich and that kind of stuff. But also that dovetails, like, because The Shadow is great because it's probably the reason he was so popular is not just because he was the proto superhero, but because it was also a really good crime pulp at the same time. So Walter Gibson was inspired by a bunch of crime pulp writers. You know, he was inspired by Sherlock Holmes and even horror stuff and what have you. And so he kind of dovetailed that into what became the pulp action hero, whatever, and basically created an entire genre. The Shadow really is where it all starts.
Exactly. Oh, and you got the pulp kind of runs the gamut of stuff. Like I've got the World War II espionage stuff and everything else.
Right.
And it's
and Argosy is a variety magazine, so they could do all different genres and stuff.
Oh yeah. Longest running pulp that it was great.
Although Black Mask is still being published.
Yes, that is true.
With terrible stories in it.
Yeah. Well, let's pull on that thread a little bit. Why is there such a degrading of storytelling these days? I mean, the simple answer would be communists are everywhere. That's the simple answer. And I would like to give the benefit of the doubt and say maybe it's not just that communists are everywhere. Maybe it's a lot of different things. Maybe it's
I'm not saying it's communist, but it's communists. Yes.
Yeah. Maybe it's this thing. Maybe it's that. From your perspective, what would be, because it seems to be across the board, movies, comics, novels. I mean, I can't walk into a bookstore without being bombarded by all these, basically softcore pornography in the what they call romantic section these days. And it's where do you see this? Like, why is that? Why is there so much deconstruction in storytelling these days?
It's a good question. Probably beyond I think you have to look beyond format and look more toward genre, because I think it's deconstruction in a bunch of genres simultaneously. Right? Like, it even happened in Westerns. It even happened watch a superhero movie today. One of the two that are going to be released in the next year, because the genre is actively dying. But why is it dying? Because we've reached the deconstruction phase. We're now, we're out of the prime. We're out of the decline phase. Now we're in deconstruction mode. And it's just imploding, right? That's kind of happened to a lot of genres simultaneously. I also think another thing, I just talked about the crime genre. One of the reasons I do film noir archives is because film noir has been hijacked by film nerds. It has been hijacked by the film circuit stooges. It has been hijacked by a bunch of people with wacky socio-political views centered in San Francisco. The crime genre does not belong to wine moms. The crime genre is the purview of the Chandlers and the Hammetts. Hammett and Chandler helped. I believe Chandler said it was only going to be a matter of time before American crime writers took the genre native, right? Made it in a way that Americans could relate to. And basically through true crime and the blue-haired, clipped-haired, hipster glasses sort of true crime podcast genre and whatever, I feel like it's been carried far afield. You can see that sort of reenacted across genre. Fantasy, action, even romance, certainly. We don't have sweeping, heartfelt Victorian romances like Wuthering Heights anymore. Like, we don't. That doesn't happen. It's strictly fetishist, wish fulfillment, softcore porn now, and it's just led to the whole degradation. And then you factor in that a lot of these companies have been losing money for a long time, especially the traditional publishing houses. Mm-hmm. And you can see this in video games, you can see this in movies, you can see it in whatever. Then all of a sudden they see a bunch of free money sitting on a table. Okay, we're losing money. Here's a bunch of free money. And it comes from a little thing called a DEI or ESG fund.
Exactly.
And hey, you can have this money to fund your project and you'll be less, we know you're risk averse. This will defray any money that you lose. but here's the checklist of things that you've got to have in your story. And most of these publishing houses being based on the coasts, off in the East Coast or off in the West Coast, they're already inclined to propagandize and proselytize in their own way because their sociopolitics are just absolute detritus to begin with. So that doesn't take a whole lot of arm twisting to get them to do that. They're already shrieking lefties in most cases. So it's like, all right, we'll have 20 black lesbians and double amputees in our story for no reason. It was not hard to persuade them to do that. But it really, I think it comes down to a very cynical understanding that we're less risk averse or we're less inclined to suffer a massive, shortfall of funds by releasing this if we take this free money. And again, you've seen that in video games like crazy.
Exactly. And I think that's kind of that's a big part of it too. Like I'm glad you brought that up, the risk aversion, because that seems to be a thing, not just in storytelling, in putting things out there. Even in people just like trying to find a church, even it's like, well, I've got to drive an extra 10 minutes to get to this church, even though it's more biblical and stuff like It seems to be a very risk averse, kind of culture we're living in. And I think with recent events, I think that's going to start to change. I'm hoping and praying that people start to wake up more that, this is everything that you do that's worth doing is going to be a fight, and it's going to be an uphill battle for a long time before it actually pays any dividends, if it ever does pay dividends. What's ultimately
and to say nothing of the price that has to be paid along the way. Shoot, what could be more germane to the events of the last week? Look at what happened post Charlie Kirk's death with so many people. Okay, I'm going to roll the dice and walk into a church for the first time in 10 years. Right. Look at how many people, but look at the cost that had to be paid to do that. I'd rather have Charlie Kirk back than any of that. It's wonderful that those people are having their spiritual awakening, but I think we would have been better served by still having someone like a Charlie Kirk alive to minister to some of these people, but along the way, while we are headed, I think, to a slightly better place in some ways, there's a tremendous cost that has to be paid. There's a tremendous germane to a Raymond Chandler quote. It's easier to jump into a sewer than to climb back out. That's kind of where we're at as a society and in creative pursuits and religiously. And there are so many what I call cathedrals to carnality at this point. And, we could probably talk ad astra about the absolute, I don't even consider it Christian, let alone Lutheran heresy of the ELCA and what they've turned into, and melting down candlestick holders into vagina statues. And like, what are we even doing at this point? And that it's what happens when you lose the foundation completely. I mean, the ELCA, their main issue was that when the merger happened, there were so many different churches that had so many different opinions about the Book of Concord and about the scriptures. And you had, very, very strong church bodies that were, quia subscription. They were, the confessions say what the scripture says. And then you had the ones that were influenced by German higher criticism, and German higher criticism ended up winning out to the point to where the Book of Concord is accurate insofar as, and the scriptures are accurate insofar as I want them to be. So, the clip that was going around X or Twitter, the ladies like, this Philemon guy, although she mispronounces Philemon's name, I don't know how he can be a Christian because he's rich and owns slaves. And it's like, lady, you just need to shut up. Please, just shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. You can't even pronounce the guy's name. What was the deal with that? What was the deal with that slaves obey your masters Bible verse? What was that about?
I know, right?
Oh, goodness.
It's crazy.
I have no idea. If you want to open a real can of worms, talk about where a lot of that came from, which is, of course, Germany, which was where Lutheranism was the state religion. and how there's a
Yeah.
lot of people on the so-called Whignat, white nationalist, Christian nationalist side now who would like very much for the state imposition of religion, which I would argue is like the worst thing you could possibly do. I'm seeing people on the LCMS side, and I that is an ahistorical take and a theological take, because if you look at the Seminex controversy, that really was informed by the cohabitation and the corruption that resulted from GIs and other Lutherans and stuff going over to Germany after World War II and taking on all that carnal gospel that was being thrown around in Germany, like with the critical theory that you were talking about.
Right.
And bringing it back to the St. Louis seminary, and that ultimately corrupting a lot of people to the point where they were doubting if they were calling Adam and Eve a myth. They were saying they were doubting the virgin birth, one thing after another. To me, like the last thing in the world, and of course the problem with this is, how do you define Christian nationalists? They hate it being defined.
Right.
But I just I can't understand that stance as a Lutheran, especially not LCMS, where the wounds of Seminex should be very, very fresh in your mind, and you should have some kind of knowledge that this came from a long period of Lutheranism being the state religion of Germany. When you become wed to the state, there is a backwash that takes place there. Ask the Holy Roman Empire. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So I think
And
that's important, and
Lutherans-
not a lot of people are talking about it, but they completely lose me on that one.
Yeah, and Lutherans have a two kingdom theology. We have, a left-hand kingdom that is obviously set up by ordinance of God, Romans 13, but we also have the right-hand kingdom, which is the kingdom of the church. And the two, while they interact with one another, they do not overlap and intermingle. So if anybody's familiar with, the Book of Concord and calls themselves a Confessional Lutheran, I would assume that, at least the vagueness of Christian nationalism would probably be enough to say, no, thank you, I'm fine for now. Like, if someone's going to say, I like my, government to be informed by Christian values, I mean, I'm obviously okay. If you want to call that Christian nationalism, fine. But
that's
like
there's the problem, right? There's the
Yeah.
problem. Because when I talk Christian nationalism, usually I try and use what I believe is the most benign dictionary definition, right? What's a nationalist? Someone who loves and is allegiant to their nation. Like, that would be pretty basic grade school definition of what a nationalist is. And then what's a Christian? Well, obviously it's a Christian, right? So not ELCA. No, but it's a Christian. So a Christian nationalist, therefore, would be a Christian who is allegiant to his nation, and presumably there would be an implication of the allegiance to the church and God at the same time. So but for some reason, when that is your definition, you get a whole lot of hemming and hawing. No. That's not what we are. We're just people who are vaguely patriotic and Christian, and I think they like to keep it nebulous. I don't think they like to have it defined, because that gives them a lot of wiggle room to advocate for a lot of stuff that isn't necessarily in accord with Christianity or patriotism, or if they happen to be of the Lutheran persuasion, the Book of Concord as well. So that's been my observation anyways.
Yeah. And what's interesting too is that they very well could define it. I mean, in some sense, even the Book of Concord talks about, again, the two kingdoms theology. They are very, obviously it's good and right and salutary, according to the Augsburg Confession, that we have civil magistrates and that Christians can hold office and everything. So, it's not like this question hasn't been asked in church history before.
It was important in Lutheranism because of the, small called league and all this. I mean, Lutheranism was all wrapped up in European politics really from the get-go. So it was something that they had to deal with right from the beginning. Yeah.
Well, even going down to things like self-defense and, the resistance that the lower magistrate owes when there's tyranny, the Magdeburg Confession and all that stuff. Like, this is stuff that we have asked, especially as Lutherans. Like, we have asked these questions before and have been upfront and personal about this. We've wrote confessions on it. The Magdeburg Confession, in some sense, is a precursor to the Second Amendment of our Constitution in the United States. So it's not like the Christian nationalists could not define these things if they wanted to. But like you said, I think they keep it nebulous because it's easier that way, because then you can backtrack and say, well, that's not really my position, even though that's what I was saying, 2 weeks ago on my podcast or whatever. So
Yeah.
I think that's something that, and have you read the Magdeburg Confession yet?
No, I'm in, what am I in? The Augsburg Apology right now.
Okay, so, well, Magdeburg didn't make it into the Book of Concord, unfortunately. There were some that lobbied.
Yeah, I'm aware of the Magdeburg. It's not a part of the Book of Concord.
Yeah, but still pretty high up there. The idea of the resistance of the lower magistrate when tyranny is afoot, and the idea of self-defense too. I mean,
that's where Martin Luther he migrated a bit on the subject of self-defense. I know, where initially he was very pacifist in some of his statements. Then he got into, in order to defend, it's like the highest honor of a Christian to defend a brother in Christ from risk of life and injury. And then even went so far as, sometimes self-defense is a preemptive attack sometimes, right? Like he literally moved that far ultimately. Which is interesting. That's an interesting thing. I've always been fascinated by some of the arguments that I've read in connection with Luther on that subject, because you're correct. Like you hear some echoes of Second Amendment, castle doctrine, certainly. Like some of this stuff is definitely wrapped up in that.
Yeah. Well, I was having a discussion with one of my congregants at St. Patrick, and we were talking about, especially in the wake of, like Charlie Kirk's death and stuff like that, dusting off the Magdeburg Confession and seeing what's going on here, because we do have a balanced take on this as Lutherans. Like we don't go out and, seek violent means, but when tyranny comes, we have that biblical right of defending ourselves. And
you'll appreciate this. You'll appreciate this, by the way. I apologize for cutting you off.
No, you're good.
My pastor wanted to record a special video reacting to the death of Charlie Kirk, because he had done some work with Charlie Kirk. He'd done some work with Turning Point. It really hit him hard, and his family too. Some of his family members did a lot of work with Turning Point. So he takes me into his office. He's going to sit down. We're going to record this thing. And he's still got his vestments on because he just did the service and the sermon and everything. So before he can sit down, I guess he's small of the back carries. He whips out a pistol and freaking takes out the mag and lays it on the counter. He's like, you didn't see that. Nice. Before he sits down and records it. I love it. But anyways, so.
Nice.
I apologize for cutting you off mid-thought there.
No, that's fine. That's a good story there. It's my bishop always says the three things that you never go without: your pistol, your knife, and your Zippo. So I'm always like, I got to have those three things. So
nice.
But yeah, it's unique to, I think it's unique to Lutherans in some way, because I mean, obviously you have St. Augustine's theories of just war, and you have different church fathers throughout the histories coming down on different aisles of this debate of self-defense and things like that. I think Lutherans had a unique position in doing that because they lived through the Peasants' Revolt, which was basically their mostly peaceful but fiery protests back in the day. Right. They lived through the tyranny of Charles V. They lived through these things, and so they're speaking. And I love that the Magdeburg Confession starts with, first off, this is what we hold as the doctrine of the Christian faith. So they go through, like, who is God? How do we handle the scriptures? Like, that's the first part of the Magdeburg Confession. And then they get into, here's how we're going to resist tyranny. Here's how we're backing that up biblically and historically. And I think Lutherans have a unique position on that because, like I said, we kind of had to live it. We had to live through that, the revolts and the attacks from the papists and the Smalcaldic League and stuff like that. So,
and the Counter-Reformation.
God. Oh yeah. And the Counter-Reformation.
So I'm of German extraction, but haven't really done the DNA test thing on account of I don't feel like being framed for a murder, but it is believed that my German blood comes from Austria. So I've always been like curious as far as the history of Lutheranism in Austria, and I saw just a baffling. I started researching it, and some of the statistics will just, your jaw will hit the floor. Where really in the immediate afterglow of the Lutheran Reformation, it was estimated somewhere between 70 and 80% of practicing Christians in Austria were describing themselves as Lutheran or having Lutheran sympathies or whatever. In the immediate afterglow of the Lutheran Reformation, before the Counter-Reformation.
Right.
So after the Counter-Reformation, I'm curious. I'm like 70, 80%. That's absolute insanity. So what is it now? I go to Chat GPT. Hey, what exactly is the rate of Lutheranism in Austria? Keeping in mind, I think the ban on practice of Lutheranism was only lifted in the early 19th century or something like that in Austria. Oh, 4%, 5%, something like that. So if you want to know the kind of violence and coercion that happened in the country of Austria in the immediate wake of the Reformation, that'll pretty well tell you, from 80% to 5%. That's insanity.
Yeah, and that goes to another thing too, that like there's this idea that, and it's a true idea, I believe, that the church grows through persecution in a lot of ways. The church, we don't get a soft life as Christians, and you can see that. I mean, you see it with even the Prussian Union and how Lutheranism flourished under being forced by the state to unite with the Calvinists, and because they were like, I got to tell this story because it's a great story. When one of the priests in one of the towns in the Prussian Union was, suspected of being a crypto Calvinist, you had the local butcher show up, and his daughter was going to get baptized the next Sunday, and the local butcher shows up with his meat cleaver and says, "If my daughter is not baptized with the Lutheran rite, this meat cleaver will meet your head." And it's like you got things like that during those times of struggle. And it's like, I think that as much as we pray, and we pray in the general prayer every Sunday that, Lord, keep us from, false and pernicious doctrine, from war and bloodshed, plague and pestilence, calamity by fire and water. We pray for those things. But at the same time, we know that God refines our gold through that too. Where do you see things going, especially in light of recent?
I love the C.H. Spurgeon quote, like every bar of gold must pass through the fire. I love
yes.
Sorry. Anyways.
Beautiful. Well, where do you see that going, especially in light of recent events? Because it's like, I mean, I don't think I've gotten over like Charlie Kirk's death, really, truly.
No, man, still it hits me. Like it hit me last night. Because it had just come out that his wife was going to take over, which of course, I think that was his wishes, was that his wife take over. But every time I hear about his wife, all I can think about is those kids. And how do you even deal with, oh, daddy's here 1 minute and now he's gone? How do you even deal with that?
Yeah.
How does that, and the kind of questions they're going to have about the nature of God. God's good. God's kind. Why did he take my dad? Why did he? Right. These are going to be questions that they ask as they grow up, and this is going to be painful stuff. And it hits me hard, man, every single time. My pastor, right before he recorded that video on Charlie Kirk, he was, he had set his gun down, and he literally was sitting there with his key. He had his notes, and he had an idea of what he wanted to say. And he just turned to me and he was like, I think we kind of all have PTSD right now. In a weird way. Like I feel like the whole sort of American right, MAGA, whatever you want to call them, sort of right now are a little bit post-traumatic stress right now. That's the feeling that I get. I feel that big time right now. Definitely.
Oh, yeah.
The stream last week, we didn't even prepare for it, because how do you prepare for something like that? How do you even, we were just going to react and try and process as best as we possibly could. That's all you could really do, and do it sincerely. It's the people who, after all of this, decide to make it all about them that drive me up the wall. And we don't have to mention their names. They do it enough. But
Yeah, well, I've seen a lot of the I know a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy who spoke to Charlie Kirk's assistant who said he was really looking into Roman Catholicism, or he was really
which I find wild, because it's like he married his wife like 3 years ago or something like that, and I would think marrying a girl who was baptized Catholic probably would have been the moment to convert to Roman Catholicism. That probably would have been
Yeah.
the occasion, personally.
Yeah.
I have no doubt, like, because he was so outwardly Christian, he probably had a lot of Roman Catholics who were like, I'm gonna convert you, just a joking thing,
Oh, yeah,
whatever. Like, I know Rob Schneider was like that with him. He released a text message where he's like, all right, my future Catholic brother, you know what I mean? Like, he's teasing
And
with
I
the guy.
yeah, and I can understand that passion from. I mean, I've got
Yeah.
Roman Catholic friends that are that passionate too, but it's the
Well, I threw it, for what it's worth, I threw it out. And actually, speaking of my stream last week, it was interrupted halfway through by a call from a relative of mine who let me know that the church that Charlie attends out here in Phoenix and that he speaks at, the first Wednesday of every single month, was going to hold a memorial the night he was killed. And that is not a Roman Catholic church, gang. So
yeah.
he's there every Sunday, at least when he can be, because obviously he's a busy guy, but he also spoke there the first Wednesday of every single month. And it's a very famous church, big mega church up in North Phoenix. And I didn't say the name of it because I don't know if his family's still going to worship there. Like, I don't want people like harass them or whatever.
Right, exactly.
But you could infer it's a very big church out here in Phoenix. It's just weird. It's this weird kind of, I don't know what to call it, claiming him. I don't even know Charlie Kirk. I don't know Charlie Kirk from Adam. It's ridiculous that someone like me just has to set the record straight because we happen to live in the same town, and
Right.
I guess I have relatives that attend the same church.
Yeah, so I think it's coming from a few different perspectives. I mean, I do not want to try to read people's minds and lump everybody into one single. There's obviously the phony people that are just doing it for the clout or just doing it because, again, Charlie Kirk was definitely going to talk with this person or that person and convert, and they desperately wanted that. Maybe that's overly passionate. I think there's a theological aspect to some of it because, well, if Rome and the East, excuse me, believe that they are the one true church, but yet they're wanting to honor Charlie Kirk, who is clearly evangelical Protestant. How do you do that? How do you do that while claiming to be the one true church,
Yeah, and I had forgotten that in the Q&A that he did the day he was killed, he had been asked a question about religion and literally described himself as evangelical Christian that day.
Right.
In the same event where sadly his life was taken. It's just such a weird maneuver. It's very, very strange. You get a lot of this though, in online. I feel like the quality of just apologetics across the aisle for everyone has really, really gone down, drastically down, to the point where we talked about the falsehood of Martin Luther ripping books out of the Bible. Like, that's something that Rome conceded isn't true a long time ago.
Oh yeah.
And yet their adherents are basically resurrecting a lie that their own official Vatican encyclopedias have laid to rest. They have actually mitigated that error, and it's no longer a part of their official accusations against Martin Luther. I actually feel like official Roman Catholic apologetics against Luther have become like really surprisingly charitable in recent years. It's the sort of Tradcath Crusader podcast cosplayer guys who sort of resurrect these falsehoods and throw them back at you. It makes for an easy layup when you know anything about the Reformation or about the history of the Roman Catholic Church. But I'd rather we didn't have to address things that have just been laid to rest so long ago.
Yeah, well, that
The whole thing
that's what
about him
gets me.
sex trafficking nuns too. That thing.
Oh my
Like-
goodness. It's like, yeah, because he married a nun. Oh, goodness.
No, it goes beyond that. Oh, he had a whole trafficking up. He had an underground railroad for railing nuns. You know, real.
Yeah. Wow. Some of these things, it's just, it's, like I'm kind of putting myself in this little trying to be apologetic, in that sphere with Lutheranism and everything. And it just gets so just over and over. It's like a broken record. To this day, I still, even though I've put out the video, even though I've linked to the video numerous times, still get people say, well, he hated the book of James. He wanted to throw the book of James in the fire. And it's like, goodness gracious. Like, most of the stuff is in English. You can read it in, well, the big lie about him adding the word alone in Romans 3:28. It's like, the Greek horos is what he's translating, and a line is the closest in German. Like, do you not read German? Obviously not, because this is not an addition. This is an explanation. That's what you do with translation. But going back to the Charlie Kirk stuff, I think that there's some sincerity in a lot of them. Again, that they want to be, they feel like they're in the one true church. But I feel like, once again, our Lutheran tradition has a much better way of addressing this, especially with Christians we disagree with, because we have, the tripartite of the visible church. You have heretical churches, which, Mormon, Jehovah's Witness, ELCA fall into that. Yeah.
I like that formulation.
But then you have, you have, if you're confessional Lutheran, you'd say, okay, as a confessional Lutheran, I believe that I hold to the Orthodox Catholic faith. But then what do you do with all these other Christians? Well, there's heterodoxy out there. There's truth mixed with error, but we're not going to kick anybody else out of the kingdom. We're not going to say that if you're not quia subscription to the Book of Concord, you're not making it into heaven, because we obviously believe sola fide, faith alone. So we can look at a guy like Charlie Kirk and say, well, he's got a lot of things that I might disagree with him, maybe on baptism and stuff like that. Maybe we could have a conversation. But
his dispensationalism,
exactly, that's a big thing.
Is not biblical, and there were definitely things I disagreed with Charlie Kirk about. It is interesting, like he was never. I have been very vocal in my criticism of Ben Shapiro, very vocal in my criticism of Tucker Carlson, going back before any of this Israel-Palestine stuff, by the way. You can go back through my oldest videos, and I'm making fun of Tucker Carlson and Ben Shapiro and whatever. Charlie Kirk never... I'd have a difference with him every now and then, but it was never like that. Because I got this... I don't know what it was. First off, I think he argued better. I think that's the first thing. Like, I think he was a better rhetorician, period, than Ben Shapiro was, than any of these people. So I think that's the first thing. But even when you disagreed with him, you got the sense that he was engaging in sincerity. Like, he had that sincere belief, he had arrived at it, but he was amenable to correction. Right. Which is not, that cannot be said of a lot of people. Like, I can't right now in my head, if I asked myself as a thought exercise to picture what Candace Owens repentant looks and sounds like, I couldn't do it. I have no frame of reference. There is no context for it. Right.
Exactly.
But I could picture Charlie Kirk going, oh, wow, I've never heard that before. I'll have to look into that. You know what I mean? Because I have a lot of frame of reference for that, because he would actually do that. Right? Yeah. Which I think it's maybe that's fueling some of this, because maybe he was engaged by a Roman Catholic or an Orthodox person at some point, on some point that he wasn't clear on. And they corrected him on something. And because he's an honest person and didn't know the full particulars of it, he probably said, oh, interesting, cool point. Interesting. I'll have to look into that. And they created entire fan fiction out of that. That's my sense of it anyways.
Yeah. And I think you want somebody like that on your side. Like, it would be really cool. But at the same time, again, as Lutherans, we kind of look at that and go, well, he's a brother in Christ. We would disagree, but I'm not going to claim him for my team, because that's not honest. That would be bearing false witness. And even though we want him, like I would love that if Charlie Kirk became a confessional Lutheran before he died, that'd be great. But also, it's probably not a good idea to go around writing fan fiction and breaking the 8th commandment on someone that we're still mourning, in some sense.
Yeah, it's stunning. And not only that, but Charlie Kirk, he would work with people of all different denominations. Like my pastor in the video that he recorded talked about an encounter where it was him and like 12 different pastors from all different denominations, Assemblies of God and Presbyterians and everybody all together. And then Charlie Kirk walks in the room and he didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for organizational muscle. All he did was ask questions about, okay, what's your church looking like? What's the membership looking like? How young is it? Like, what are the, because he was obsessed with the idea of reaching Zoomers and, younger millennials and trying to engage with those people and try and get them to think critically. Which I think is, by the way, something that we have really lost. Maybe it's one of the great advantages of Lutheranism that so often, especially in like LCMS, they're attached to schools. But in education, I did a video on what we can learn from Cicero. We used to have an education system that was built around the Ciceronian model, where you were kind of turned into a Renaissance man. But the idea was everybody focuses on the different subjects that you were taught, which there were no limits. But the Cicero model was distinct from the current model, which was it was also present in ancient Rome, and it was reserved for serfs and slaves. It was vocational. Here's just what you need to know to do your job as a slave, which is very telling.
Yes.
But the Ciceronian model instead taught you a model of how to correctly think, of how to logically deduce facts from available evidence. And it was the sort of subject matter was just a way of getting to that. In forsaking that, I think that really is at the root of the problem with our discourse on just about every societal, political, and religious level.
Exactly. And you can see this too when I think people are going into a complete panic over the AI and stuff like that. And you see the memes going around, and the guy that I did all my college papers on ChatGPT, and they're like, oh, this is the end of education. No, it's the end of this system of education, because if anything, this kid who did all of his let ChatGPT do all of his papers has shown that nobody is teaching rhetoric. Nobody's teaching people how to think about these things. It's all about getting to, again, that serfdom, that, kind of funnel through process that public education has been in the gutter with for so long. And that's something that is, I have said to many people, and I really should do a video on this maybe, but you did the Cicero video, and that's pretty, I just linked to that. I'm pretty lazy sometimes. But I should probably do a video on that, because I have said to a lot of people, and I've said it to people in my congregation, that it's okay. I would rather these kids get all of their papers done on ChatGPT, because it exposes how bad the education system has gotten when they can do that and they can't think through their own ideas or anything like that. It's been that way for so long. ChatGPT just came along and said, hey, I'll expedite the process for you.
Yep. It absolutely, it's like the thing that AI can't model, and you see this, it really probably is the root from which all of the AI errors flow. AI doesn't have the capacity to think in that reasoned way. Only a human being can do that. And the longer AI has been around, the more obvious that becomes, and the more glaring the errors of AI become. It actually gets less advanced in that sense. So this is actually an attack vector to preserve your job. This is an attack vector to preserve your future of gainful employment and preserve your job from the steady encroachment of AI. And yet it is one battlefront that for some reason not even the right are really pushing back on very far. Like there's two quizzical fronts, or two fronts that the right is quizzically kind of silent on, and that's one of them. The other one is state electoral college, and that is a big cause celebre of mine. Those two things I wave the flag for perpetually. That, and I guess judicial impeachment needs to be more regularly applied. But those are kind of my pet issues.
Well, you might. You're probably one of the reasons why I'm a little bit lazy, because anytime one of those subjects come up, I just send somebody RazörFist video. So It's like I get a text from one of my, especially like the younger ones, like whether it be teenagers or just young families, because at St. Patrick we have, goodness, the young ones outdo the old ones in our church. Thanks be to God. But whenever I get a question like that, when it's more, not as theological, but it's like, we know that pastor has looked at this before, like the state electoral college thing. I'll just send them one of your videos. So like, just send the link. It's all right. But yeah, it's
if you'd like my position with F-bombs, go ahead.
Yeah, there you go. Well, I think most of the teenagers and the early 20-somethings can handle that. I'm pretty sure. Again, we don't like people cussing, in the church, of course. But it's one of those things that, where do you see the right going in this? Because again, there's so many questions going on in the right these days, whether it be, we've talked a little bit about, fiction writing and culture, the Iron Age media, being refined through the fire that's coming our way. What is some of the bigger issues that the right's kind of ignoring right now that you want them to really focus on to try to get something going?
Well, here's the great peculiarity of our present moment, and that is that we sort of can apply a hypnotic impetus, like a hypnotic stimulus, to the left to get them to do a lot of our dirty work for us. And I don't think the right sufficiently appreciate this. We today received the news, or just late last night received the news, that Jimmy Kimmel had been fired over his Charlie Kirk comments. Let's be real, it's because his numbers were in the tank and he was making $15 million a year.
Moment of silence for, Jimmy Kimmel's comedy. Oh, okay, done.
Yeah. So this is an opportunity, because now the left are crying foul about cancel culture. Okay, what's wrong with giving the left enough free rein to make that a prohibitive prospect? Institute some policies so, okay, now our social media posts can't get us fired. Well, darn. That's kind of what we wanted to begin with, right? Like, I feel like there's a number of ways in which we could apply this. After Roe v. Wade was overturned, I feel like we missed a massive opportunity to neuter the power of the Supreme Court, which we needed to do and have needed to do for a long time, because it's been activist. It's nice that we have a court that is not particularly activist today, but eventually there will be an activist court. And until we neuter the actual functional power and authority of the Supreme Court, that's going to be a problem. So in the immediate aftermath of that, the left were calling for a judicial impeachment and whatever, and the right should have been licking their lips and saying, yes, shoot, I love Clarence Thomas, but I will sacrifice Clarence Thomas's career at the altar of fixing the Supreme Court's power and authority. Because we shouldn't need a Clarence Thomas. We shouldn't need to have a Clarence Thomas on the court in order to get the court to do its job properly. So I wish we had a little bit more of a Sun Tzu kind of capacity on the right. We're not very deep strategic thinkers on the right. We have had a number of opportunities like this, and we have let them go by. State electoral college is another one. Okay, look at a red state where Democrats can't get arrested, right?
Yeah.
Push them into pushing an electoral college. And if we can get the left to push a state electoral college, well, now we have sort of a proviso. Now we can push this in other states. Now we can really, really change something. We've needed that kind of thing for a while. And unfortunately, I don't think the right are they're just not very adept at it, I don't think.
Do you think it's an issue of them not being adept and not looking ahead at it, or is it something that when they get into power, they want the same provisions that the left had? Because I think there's an element of both.
Yeah, I think there's an element of that. I think there also are multiple wings within the MAGA coalition. This is a problem with the big tent strategy. You do have people who are literally let's make Trump an elected king. And then you have other people who are all right, let's get some stuff done. We need to fix some of this stuff. We need to purge the intelligence agencies. We need to get rid of some of these intelligence agencies. That's a big cause célèbre of mine too, is I made a video called It's Time to Fire the FBI. The FBI is a temporary agency that has made itself permanent. It should have been gone a long time ago. There are other agencies that perform the same functions as it. It is a redundancy at best, even when it's functioning properly. And it has become massively corrupt. Even under Trump in his first administration, the FBI were working against him while he was in office. This is an indication that the FBI has become irreparably corrupted. And I don't think Kash Patel, as well-meaning as he might be, I don't think he's going to be able to clean it all out. This is going to require more than Roto-Rooter. This is going to require a complete teardown. I was on Sebastian Gorka, who is now a member of the Trump administration. On his radio show, I proposed auditions for deep state auditions, literally lining people up one at a time, the heads of all the deep state agencies. Okay, who are you? What do you do? All right, so what's your function? And then just writing down what all their functions are, compare them all on a great big flow chart at the end, and see whose job is redundant, who's doing the job well, grade their performance in each of these categories, and then hand that off to Trump, because Trump's a big corporate guy. He knows how to cut the fat out of a corporation, and you hand that paper to him, he's immediately going to have an understanding of, oh, wow, the ATF and the FBI do the same job, only the ATF kills dogs while they do it. Okay, ATF's gotta go, right? To me, that makes all the sense in the world. So yeah, that's just a brief laundry list of my biggest pet peeves. There's more, though, I'm sure, if you keep applying stimulus. More.
Yeah. Well, what about on the ground stuff? Because obviously there's a lot of people that would be like, well, that sounds like a lot. I'm not an elected official. I'm just a dude somewhere, or, I just try to go to church and be a good citizen. What would you say to them?
One of the most overlooked things that a regular citizen can do, it doesn't take that much time. It's not that much of a time investment. It is not a monetary investment. And if you really fall in love with it, you could wind up having a political career if you were so inclined, is becoming a precinct committeeman. You get to help with elections and local policy and all kinds of stuff, and it can be a gateway to doing more than that. It is the most overlooked way to get involved in local politics. And the United States, even though after the Civil War, the kind of structure of the government was sort of inverted to where the federal government got to tell the states what to do. Prior to that, it was the other way around. The states got to tell the federal government what to do. We still, to a large degree, have a ground-up government. Mm-hmm. So the corruptions, contrary to popular belief, the turds are not necessarily rolling downhill. Sometimes they're flowing upward because that's the way our government works. The states are kind of on top in a lot of ways, in certain categories. Like, states get to manage their own individual elections. That's why my home state of Arizona is a running punchline in every election season, because they get to mismanage their election however they like. And they've gotten very comfortable massively botching their elections. So, getting involved at a local state level can affect more on a federal level than you might initially appreciate, because it flows upward.
Exactly. Well, this is another thing that Lutherans are uniquely equipped to. Have you ever read the writings of the Tennessee Synod and David Hinkle?
No.
So look him up, especially his old pamphlet that he wrote, the Carolinian Herald of Liberty. And it's very local based. Like, he basically likens the idea of the Reformation, the church, to Reformation in society, and specifically American society, and how, from the local level it is governed. And so the church, in a Catholic sense, is united in its locality, and then also in fellowship with the broader, and he kind of goes from that, right, and everything. And right. What's interesting is the Tennessee Synod was extremely big on, being involved and taking that part of the Augsburg Confession seriously, that you are encouraged to be at the local level a part of your civil government, because that's how we're going to maintain our freedom as Lutherans. Because, David Hinkle was getting, and it didn't help that he was a pretty fiery preacher. So he was getting it from the Baptists. He was getting it from the Methodists. He was getting it from people within the North Carolina Lutheran Synod, who had gone, they were ELCA before the ELCA was cool, you know?
Right.
And it was like, okay, well, we have this Book of Concord, which is like our constitution for the Lutheran Church. We have this nation that's built on the principle of law and order and the Constitution. Let's do this two kingdoms thing in a real way that actually makes sense. And the Tennessee Synod were great at doing that, to the point to where, I mean, they were involved in, you know, stuff during the Civil War and setting up hospitals and stuff like that. And they were also converting people. Even in the midst of the Civil War, they were baptizing like 300 people a year. And it during the middle of a war, and
Right.
In the middle of the South too. And it's something that, again,
The heavily
looking at
Catholic
Lutheran
South at that time.
Exactly. So David Hinkle is probably one of my favorite, if not he is my favorite American Lutheran theologian. He is distinctly, he said, I'm American, I'm proud to be an American, and I'm also Lutheran, and I'm proud to be Lutheran. And
Right.
David Hinkle's awesome guy. I think you should check him out. I think you might like him.
Sweet.
You also did a video on Abraham Lincoln and the Civil War, and it was totally, completely accepted by everybody, and totally was not,
And nobody was mad about it, and still
nobody
is.
was mad about it at all. Coincidentally enough, the people that tried to refute you on that I think they just got emotionally mad, and they didn't actually refute any points, because I watched some of those videos, and it was like, no, he's wrong about this because reasons,
one of my favorite things in the world was when I purposely put this portion in the video because I knew that there were going to be rage baiters who are immediately going to they were going to react. They were going to do the picture-in-picture thing where they just play the video and react because lazy people do that. People who argue.
Hey, I resemble that remark.
Right. People who argue in a lazy fashion often employ that format, and defenders of Abraham Lincoln generally fall into that category because it is the widely accepted view. It doesn't require a whole lot of academic research. And believe me, not much academic research was applied in that instance. But I put a portion in it where I started off with a quote that was super, super racist. It was I am not in fellowship with black people. I am in favor of my own race. And to the extent that we must favor one race, I am in favor of the race to which I belong. As originally said by Confederate President, oh, wait, that was Abraham Lincoln.
I remember that.
And as I'm quoting it, the face of the president of the Confederacy is fading in the background, and then it changes to Abraham Lincoln. And the guy literally caught himself in that. He's in the middle of, I knew it! I knew he had said that! See what I mean? And literally then Abraham Lincoln's face pops up and he just moves on to the next point. I laughed so hard at that.
That was one of the more hilarious ones. Well, to be fair to myself, I do sometimes do that, but I tend to watch the videos that I'm responding to before I actually, respond to them. So I think he could have done that. But
well, you're a finer man than he was, Gunga Din.
Well, with what, just briefly, like, what got you interested in that topic? Because once again, being a Lutheran and being in the specific Lutheran Synod that I'm in, we take a lot of our history from the Lutheran Synod of the South, which broke from, and you mentioned this in your video, not specifically about the Lutheran Synod in the South, but a prayer that was forced on the churches for Abraham Lincoln. And this was actually the thing that made the Lutheran Synod of the South exist, because the General Synod had adopted this and said, the president wants us to do it. We're going to do it. We're going to name Abraham Lincoln in the general prayer. And the South was like, the Southern Lutherans were like, no, we're not, because we already pray for, the magistracy. We already pray for
officials, and yes.
Yeah.
And they coercively applied that, and there was a very prominent incident, I remember, where a pastor refused. He was reported. He was told to do it. He refused again, and ultimately he was arrested, I believe. And without charge or trial, like all of Abraham Lincoln's opponents were. They were not charged. They were just ultimately released later on. There was never a charge of any kind, but just completely extrajudicial, shades of January 6th, really, what happened to a lot of those people. But yeah, I had completely forgotten about that portion in the video. It's been a couple of years since I put that out, but
yeah. Well,
that was a big thing. There was always this weird religious undercurrent to, and there still is, to the Abraham Lincoln myth. And you'll see it in Christian quarters a lot of times where they're like, oh, his soaring oratory on the subject of Christianity. But then you read his private writings and he is just this side of an atheist. And and if he had a Christian bone in his body, it was way overshadowed by the size of the Gnostic bones in his body.
Exactly.
No, he was not Christian at all. He would thump a Bible for political benefit only.
Exactly.
When he was in front of an audience that he knew would be sympathetic to a religious argument, he would employ a religious argument. And when he was not, he would wax atheistic. And it's wild that we got to this place where, Congress, after his death, commissioned a portrait that I've shown many times, where he's literally being assumed into heaven, born by angels. And this is not just something that was in a magazine or a newspaper. No, this was commissioned by Congress. This thing, just insane. They actually voted on this thing. But when you hear about what Congress were doing in the immediate prelude to and aftermath of the Civil War, that becomes a lot less surprising, because like the way that habeas corpus was suspended, you'll hear from the defenders of Abraham Lincoln, oh, he did that justifiably, and hey, there was a precedent for it because James Madison did that. It's like, yeah, but James Madison suspended habeas corpus with the consent of Congress. His allies asked him to suspend habeas corpus unilaterally, and he explicitly refused because it was not permitted by the Constitution. So the father of the Constitution, James Madison, had a different view than Abraham Lincoln, but Abraham Lincoln knows better. He just found a new interpretation. And so Abraham Lincoln suspends habeas corpus by himself, and then after the fact, Congress turns around and basically rubber stamps it without actually taking a vote, basically using the argument that, well, Abraham Lincoln's already suspended habeas corpus. He's already using these powers. Therefore, they are constitutionally permitted. No need to have a debate. They bang the gavel and half of the chamber just flips out. And what are we even doing here? They voice all their protests, but it's pointless because they've already adjourned the session of Congress. One of the most laughably authoritarian episodes in the history of the United States of America. And yet defenders of Abraham Lincoln bring it up as if it is a statement in defense of his tyranny. No, not at all.
Yeah. And it's one of those things, again, we keep playing this 7 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. We're playing 7 Degrees of Lutheranism here, because once again, Lutherans have a unique thing with this in American history, because while the Presbyterian and the Methodists were really focused on the idea of slavery during the Civil War, when you read Lutheran sermons, they were talking about the overreach of the left kingdom, and specifically referring to Abraham Lincoln in that. Yeah. And it's interesting that you have this war going on in the Lutheran synods over this. Specifically, that prayer to Abraham Lincoln is what made the Southern Lutherans split at a certain point. But it seemed to come from a more theologically rich idea that, hey, this guy is abusing his power. He's doing things that God has not put him in office to do. Yep. And that's interesting. It's interesting in the grand scheme of things, because again, you have a lot of Methodist and Presbyterian sermons during that time period that were almost exclusively focused on slavery. And it was, that wasn't really the issue for a lot of them. The Methodists obviously fell more on the side of Lincoln, the Presbyterians more on the side of the Confederacy, with some Northern Presbyterians, with some exception to that.
Right.
But the Lutherans were extremely theological and saying, no, it doesn't matter what the secondary politics of all this is. Lincoln does not have the right to do this, because he's dictating things outside of the law of the Constitution. And they housed it in a two kingdoms kind of doctrine, the Tennessee Synod and all the other Southern Lutherans were like that, and even some Northern Lutherans as well. You know, I mean, Pennsylvania was right along there with them, and even at Gettysburg.
Some of his most vocal critics were in the North,
Exactly.
which is why he arrested people in the North by the thousands, and even deported some of his political enemies in the North. The overwhelming amount of, I mean, look, the South resolved their issues with Lincoln by breaking away. Most of the people that they call political prisoners, they are cast as like Confederate spies or something, but no, these were like journalists. Some of them were politicians, some were priests, some were, right? These were just people who had spoken out against Abraham Lincoln in the North. His real problem politically was in the North. He even wrote a letter to Grant. One of the reasons that Sherman's March to the Sea happens, one of the reasons all those war crimes happen, is because Abraham Lincoln shoots a letter over to Grant basically saying, look, we're down to nut cutting time. Republicans are not popular in the North right now. The Civil War is not popular in the North. We're suffering from riots and civil disorder. The single largest domestic disturbance in the history of the United States happens in the North during the Civil War after the institution of the draft. And so Abraham Lincoln says to Grant, you know, if you don't make some stuff happen right now, by hook or by crook, by any method you can, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, Republicans are going to get blown out in the elections, and this war is going to be over. And
Exactly.
And that precipitated the burning of Shiloh and on and on and on. The Sherman's March to the Sea, all that stuff. That basically flows from directives directly from Lincoln to Grant. That's another problem for defenders of Lincoln, is they acknowledge that there were war crimes as a result of Sherman's March to the Sea, but they tend not to emphasize that Abraham Lincoln heavily micromanaged the war. So there was no way there was a large amount of separation between himself and that decision.
Oh yeah, for sure. There's a lot of misconceptions about that. There's a lot of misconceptions about a lot of things in history. Yeah. Then again,
you only talk about Reformation apologetics. You have no idea what this is about. What are you talking about?
Well, I mean, once again, I just got to be lazy and send them the link to your video, because I mean, what else am I going to say on the matter? I guess I could do a video on Southern Lutherans and their the left and right kingdom, sermons, or the Carolinian Herald of Liberty, but
nice.
I'll just send them a RazörFist video. It's fine.
Yeah, there you go. have them picture in picture react to
it. Well, with that being said, and I'm going to get close to wrapping up, I promise, but yeah, you are often labeled as a contrarian. I don't think that is a proper term for what I think that you have a very determined outlook on getting where the truth is, even if that's not a popular truth. And that's kind of the thing that runs through. I mean, even the idea of you being the Rageaholic. I know you said you didn't like that name, but it fits, because when you find something that so many people believe, even like, smart people supposedly believe it, and it's complete and utter BS, you've got to rant on it. That's a normal human response, and you have charged that up as your superpower. How do you feel about you being known for that, and known for going into things that, like, you're going to get some blowback with the Abraham Lincoln stuff. You're going to get some blowback. Even, reading out of the Lutheran Book of Prayer, you're probably going to get some blowback from people. Like, what is that like? And how do you kind of go forward and live long and prosper and all that stuff?
Yeah, there's been a recurrent pattern over the course of my channel where I take a very, very unpopular view 6-7 years ahead of time. 6-7 years down the line, everybody's espousing some variant of it. A good example of this is the Michael Jackson defense that I did, which was not popular to do at the time. Not popular to do. And I went categorically through court transcripts, the whole 9 yards, breaking down those allegations and why they are just fallacious. There's just no weight to them at all. That's why he was acquitted, and in record time on 14 counts.
Yeah, we could talk for another 2 or 3 hours on that particular saga because, again,
Right.
going back to 7 degrees of Lutheranism, the 8th commandment, don't bear false witness against your neighbor. So much false witness, even to this very day, about Michael Jackson.
Absolutely. But now you can see even Candace Owens has taken up the call of defending Michael Jackson and whatever. It's like I'm always like 6-7 years ahead of the curve on this. It's important to plant your flag, even if you're not necessarily going to be the person to benefit from it. It is important to plant your flag on a thing that you know to be true, at least at that moment. I'm always amenable to being corrected if details change. But if you have discovered something that appears to all outward appearances to be true, even and especially if that is not popular, it is important to go on the record as saying that. I think it is very, very important. And when you future-proof yourself in that way, you can often have bragging rights down the road. And you know what? Bragging rights don't even matter. It's just you at least cultivate the impression that people, because here's the utility of being, I guess, a pundit, whatever, online. It's not important that my audience agree with me. It's important that my audience understand where I'm coming from, what my basis for these opinions is, understands my alignment, so that they can then weigh their own alignment and their own beliefs in relation to that, because that's the only way I have utility. They don't have to agree with me. It's just a question of, oh, okay, I know that person isn't full of crap. They are sincerely expressing their opinion. They are not prevaricating in any way. That is something that I can bank on. If they're in error, it's an innocent and honest error.
Exactly.
It's not a situation where you have someone who habitually lies, a bearer of habitual falsehood, like an Ian Carroll or whatever we're going to have boots on the ground in Iran any minute now. That's, gosh, it's been 3 months, guys, any minute now, I guess.
Yeah.
It's
still waiting on that minute.
Still waiting on it. So down the line, even when people come around to your view, it's like, okay, well, at least you were able to change some hearts and minds. I have no doubt that my Michael Jackson videos had a lot with changing minds on that. When I did a live stream with, it all kind of culminated in a live stream I did with Taj Jackson, the nephew of Michael Jackson, and Brandy Jackson, the niece of Michael Jackson. And they gave their own personal anecdotes about their uncle and like all the stuff their family had been through, and defended him as well as they were able. Because that's the thing. I feel so bad for the family because they've had to deal with this for how many decades. And Michael Jackson, I believe, was called home to the Lord. He was apparently a practicing Christian. He had come from a Jehovah's Witness background, but I believe he came to a Christian. The point is, his struggle is over, right? Their struggle has just begun. Their struggle has been ongoing. So when I did that live stream, I was blown away. It was like, I forget how many people watched live. It was one of my most viewed live streams ever. And that to me was evidence that, okay, people are coming around to this a little bit. They are starting to see through the false narrative a little bit. And I've noticed a little by little over time that we've been able to correct the record on the defamation of a dead man, a man who cannot defend himself. That's one of the reasons I spoke up. I mean, it's kind of pointless for me to speak up about the Charlie Kirk church thing, except that people are trying to piggyback off of a guy who can't correct the record himself.
Exactly.
His wife maybe could, but should she have to deal with anything right now except being close to her family, trying to get Turning Point stuff in order, and mourning for her husband? Like, she shouldn't have to deal with all that. Someone should come out of the woodwork, and in this case, it had to be me because I had knowledge, at least, of the situation of where they actually worshipped and what their church was.
Exactly.
I think it's important to do those things. Personally,
exactly.
Whether you benefit from it or take the slings and arrows, and 9 times out of 10, you take the slings and arrows, and then 5-6 years down the line, everybody suddenly has come to your way of thinking, but nobody wants to admit that they lied about you. That is the annoying part.
It reminds me of a certain German monk. Reminds me of him.
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
Doesn't it?
I think he said something about
many of the errors. So many of the errors he pointed out, Rome now admits to, and has reformed in some cases.
Yeah. Well, and he said, unless I'm convinced by scripture and by clear reasoning, here I stand. I can do no other. God help me. Amen. I mean, that's in some sense, that's kind of what you do in a lot of your videos, and Lord willing, that's what I try to do. And anybody who's doing this you know, for the right reasons, I should say, is probably like that. Like, hey, I just want to tell the truth. And if I'm not telling the truth, then yeah, I'm open to be corrected on it. But I believe this is the truth, and I believe the truth can stand. It stands up for itself. Like, I just got to let the lion out of the cage.
Right. Right. If you make an error, and you're always going to make an error, every time you make a video, you're always going to mess something up. That's just how it is. You can't make the perfect video. No one can. But if you're approaching it from a sincere perspective, even if you misarticulate something, misedit something, whatever it is. And I've had that where I've misquoted one guy, or in my Abraham Lincoln video, I said that Alexander de Tocqueville wanted to broker a peace between South and North. Or Alexis de Tocqueville, rather, wanted to broker a peace between North and South, and he was rebuffed by Abraham Lincoln. That was a mistake. I don't work from a script. I had been talking about de Tocqueville. I had actually met Napoleon III, an even more famous, an even more famous person, had attempted to broker a peace between North and South. So it actually made my argument even better if I had gotten the correct name. But when somebody wants to insincerely criticize you, they're going to take that out of context. Oh, see, he's just lying about, even though the truth makes my point even more vehemently, right?
Exactly.
But if you're approaching it in sincerity, even when you make errors like that are just going to happen, the overall truth of the hypothesis is going to come out. There are errors, quite a lot of errors in the 95 Theses.
Oh,
but
yeah.
The truth of them has withstood the test of time. 100%. The truth of them wound up changing the course of human civilization. It's not a exaggeration to say that. So I think if you approach it in truth and sincerity, that goes a long way.
Exactly. And that's something and going back to what we were previously talking about people being risk averse and everything. I think that's one of the things that a lot of people don't want to speak up about certain things because they are kind of risk averse. Well, what if I get it wrong? What if I say this? What if I do that? And, I can't lie and say that I haven't felt that myself. And I understand where people are coming from. But at the end of the day, again, if you are seeking the truth in all things, again, you will know the truth and truth will set you free. All truth leads to Christ eventually. If you are doing the best and doing the best you can with that, then you say, I, a poor, miserable sinner, I'm going to mess up, that's why, but again, I'm going with the truth. Even if I mess up, I'm going with the truth, because wherever the truth is, that's where Christ is. And so that's where I'm going to be. And yeah, we got to get over the risk averse. A lot of people have to get over the risk averse. Well, I don't know if I'm going to say this the right way, or if it's going to be taken out of context. It's like, Satan's going to accuse you of everything under the sun, including convincing you of things that you probably didn't think or say. So,
yeah. And not only that, but if we're looking at the two kingdoms formulation, or if you prefer to go back even farther, Augustine's City of God,
yep,
you are in essence in that moment putting the kingdom of man above the kingdom of God.
Exactly.
Because you are saying that I would rather be liked than be correct. I would rather be liked than be a purveyor of truth. Right. And that's a dangerous place to be, because that is the same formative error, the same incipient error that led to the heresies in the ELCA and the Episcopal Church and all of this. They are wed to the world. It's the original sin that broke the church with the formation of the Holy Roman Empire, which was neither holy nor Roman. And the more carnal and more wed to the world it became, the more persisting in error, the more paganizing the influence became. And the more errors began to accrue. And you have to be careful of that formulation. You have to ultimately say, all right, at some point, here I stand, take your best shot. I guess I'm just going to take the blows and roll with them, because I'd rather be sincere, if not necessarily correct, because you can't know if you're 100% correct every single time. But I'd rather be sincere and truthful than obsequiescent and wrong.
Exactly. Well, I'm not going to take up any more of your time. We have gone over so much stuff. We could probably go over another 2.5, 3 hours worth of stuff. I would it be too forward of me to say that, we could do this again, maybe actually proper live stream instead of recording once I figure out everything, because again, I'm a boomer. Would you be good with that?
Yeah, I'm down for that.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate this. This has been, I don't know where else to end it, because if I don't end it now, I'm just going to keep you for the rest of the night. So this is good stuff. You're
gonna kidnap me on the road from Worms and keep me in a castle translating the Bible.
Wittenberg Castle. I will, like, if things go south, though, I will make sure to add more than 3 leaves and a twig, if you get that reference. Yeah,
there we are.
But
I'm gonna add the word "alone" to every passage of Scripture where you're doing
there we go. Yeah. So, is there anything you want to end on, like specifically something that you just want to let people, tell people, encourage people, just anything? Kind of, the floor is yours for the next couple of minutes.
Well, I guess I guess I would say, in our present moment, with so many people coming back to faith or considering coming back to faith in the wake of this tragedy with Charlie Kirk, I'm hearing kind of an uptick in kind of ecclesial anxiety a little bit in people who are, where should I fall? What church can I go to? I don't want to go to those pride flag churches. I would quiet those doubts. And this is one of the great comforts of the Lutheran tradition, and one of the reasons I have found it such a worthy home. If we are cognizant of the fact that the salvific work is done by the Lord, we needn't be afraid. We are conferred with the discernment necessary to determine if it's the right place for us to land. And the Lord, by hook or by crook, will get us where we belong. So if you're considering coming back to your faith in this moment, trust in the Lord's work of salvation. He will reach out to you in baptism. He will reach out to you in sacrament, and it is yours to seek those out. Just be vigilant and allow that discernment to cultivate itself through pursuit of the word and sacrament. That would be my recommendation.
Amen. And that's why we call our service the divine service, because it's God serving us. Yeah.
Indeed. Yeah.
Exactly. All right, sir. I think that's going to do it. I don't think I can add much to that other than to say amen, and we go forth.
And Godspeed.
Amen and Godspeed. Exactly. All right.